Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look more deeply into the service layer and how you would actually use the form data that we've done on the previous videos to actually inject that into the service layer, which would then talk to the back end and do all the fun stuff. So what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly do a review of the service layer. So if I come to the services folder, I can see we have a service factory again. That we have a get method that returns the service that we're asking for. And then under the user folder, we have this user.service.ts. And essentially it's a class that extends the base service class, which would inherit anything that the service itself has. We have a number of methods inside that class. So method 1, 2, 3. And what we're going to do in this little example is we're going to add to the user service for maybe like a user sign up. We just kind of finished the sign up control, so let's go ahead and do that. So we'll start with the sign up control, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an instance of that service. So I'm going to say constant user service equals service factory. It's a singleton that gets exported from there, and we're going to say get, and we'll say user service. However, a lot like the tune model that we talked about, we need to kind of tell the getter what type of service it's returning. So we're going to say user service there. So now we have this user service variable there that we can use. So I can say user service, and I'm going to do, maybe sign up, and we're going to, or maybe, I don't know, create user. How about we do that? And I'm going to pass in the form values, and now I'm going to get this error saying, hey, property create user does not exist on user service. Do you want to create it? Go ahead and hit Control Enter, create it, and we now have that there. So let's look at an example of a login user by token. So the main thing that we do is we do an Axios request, but it's our own version of Axios. It's a loosely written wrapper around Axios where we can call get, post, patch, put, delete, all that kind of stuff. But we have the ability to pass in the expected return value from it, and the expected response. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to kind of take some of this code and possibly copy and paste it. Come down here, and we can leave that there. Typically a create user is a post type of request, and so we're going to say, hey, we're going to expect that it has a response type of maybe in a user.get. So once it creates it, it's going to return a user.get. But we could come out here and do a API.user.request.create. So again, where do all these API stuff come from? Well, that comes from your @types folder that should have been set up once you set up a proper project that will talk with the Git repo that holds the REST side. And so whoever's working on the back end, whether it's you or somebody else, they'll define this API file that gets downloaded. I've just created this fake one right here, and the requests that we have is going to be, in this case, this was the name, the email, the password, the role, that kind of stuff here. For this example, I'm just going to cut out everything and just leave it as name and primary email. That's all we're going to pass into it. And the create returns that. That's great. So if we come back to our user service, what the type that I want to ideally have here is, first of all, we're going to make this an asynchronous function, and we're going to say that the type that they have to pass in is going to be api.user.request.create, and we'll just kind of say this like create data. Take that down there, and usually we're going to post maybe just to the user endpoint. Again, we're just kind of making all this up on the fly, and we're going to put in our user data in there. Notice if this data, if I said this data was like a Boolean or something like that, you can see right here that you'll get the red saying, hey, nope, that doesn't match what your expected input type is and what your expected return type would be. So we'll go back and put that back to the API create. I usually like to add the return type to all my functions unless they're really, really simple. And so I'm going to say it's going to return a promise, and because Axios and the async wrapping of it returns a promise. User, it's going to return a response, and we're going to say it returns the create response. And so notice that it's having an error right there. Normally we try to match these up, so that goes right there. And so now it's still complaining, but it's because we actually didn't return anything. So if we return Axios response, well, now the error just went from there down to there, and that's because Axios response, the Axios values, actually wrap it in a data that we have there. And then if you notice, we wrapped it in our own data in it. So Axios kind of wraps it in a data, we wrap it in a data, so we technically got to return Axios response data. And now everything's happy, the world's all good right there, and we have that there. So if I come back to the sign-up control, notice that we have an error with the values that are here. So I'm going to change this, and what we're going to do is going to kind of delete that out there, and the form type that we're going to say we return is API user dot request dot create is the type that we have there. We need to change this now to primary email to match what that is. Change this to primary email. I'm going to delete those console logs out, and there. So one of the things that you should know is that we use exception throwing when there's errors and issues. So in Axios, if a get or a post or a put does not return a 200 status code, meaning that there was an error in the back end, it'll actually throw an exception in Axios. And so ideally what we want to do is when we call the create user, we would want to wrap that in a try catch. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to just go try and catch, and if there's an error, I'll console error log it out, and then I'm going to await that request. But remember, it actually returned the new user, so I'm going to do this and maybe print out that user right there. And so yeah, that should be good. Let me just clean up a little bit of stuff there. We have our create user that we're try catching. We're awaiting the response. It comes into here. It tries to post data to the user endpoint with the data that we passed in, and we return it right there. So that should be good. I guarantee this won't work because we don't really have a real backend that's happening right here. So I'm just going to say blah, 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 let's do a real name. So Jim at jones.com, hit enter. And you can see right here, we have a console error gateway timeout because we're not really running a backend. It actually sent off the request. If I drag this thing over and look at our network requests, I can see I did a post to API v1 user. So with our HTTP file, we actually put a base URL of API v1. So even though you didn't see it in there, it prepends it to the user. If I click on user, and if I take down this, I can look at, there's my posts, there's that, here's my request headers that went out, a whole bunch of stuff. But our data that we sent to it was name Jim, primary email Jim Jones, but our response was, hey, that was not a valid request to send to. So what we're going to do in the interest of time and what we want to kind of show in this video is I'm going to kind of fake this out. So instead of going here, we're just going to kind of console.log success, and I'll show you why I'm doing this in a second. Actually, maybe what we should do is go into the create user, and I am going to try catch this right here. Move this all in, do a catch, and I'm going to return a fake data right here. And so what's cool is in PHP Storm you can alt enter again. You can say, hey, implement all the members that it's expecting to return, and I can run prettier, and role is just a user, and I can kind of put in some fake data here. So I can return that. The name, let's just pretend that we got it from whatever here, and the email was from the create data.primary email. So this will kind of forcefully put in some stuff, password, and maybe an ID of I don't know, some math.random times 1,000, and we want it to be an integer, so we'll do a math.floor. So each time we hit enter, we'll get a different ID. Okay, let's try that. Come over here and do a jim@jones.com, hit enter. We fail, it still prints it out, but we can actually see that it returned a value of an ID of 272. We hit it again, 722, and so forth. So it's pretending like we're creating users. And we're gonna stop right there, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna actually use that data to set some global values that we'll use elsewhere. Thanks.